Hello and welcome back to another episode. Look, we've got three major things to cover off today. The first will be a nutrition paper looking at ultra runners in Ireland, where one person pops to Imodium before a race and calls that a nutrition strategy to manage gut health. There's another guy in there that uses trees as energy. That is a direct quote. I'm not making this shit up. But then we've also got the results from the Gold Coast Marathon yesterday. Haftu Strintzos breaking the Australian marathon record in 2 hours, 6 and 20 seconds, becoming the first Aussie to win the event in 20 years. So major milestone there. We'll break down his story, being an Ethiopian immigrant, did a bit of a dive on his background because obviously saw the name and was like, oh, that's a little bit interesting. So yeah, did a bit of research. I'll fill you in on his story. And then also, I'm going to be fronting the line at the Scenic Rim 100 mile in just over a month's time now. I've pulled the trigger. I finally got my race entry across the weekend. I've got a little bit of new kit that I've already started using in training that I think will make the whole process a little bit easier. So I'll share some of the things that I've noticed already with that. But first things first, this paper. So as I said, based on Irish ultra runners, the study, or the research group I should say, is Irish themselves, so run by Ryan and colleagues. This is a new paper that came out earlier this year called Understanding the Behavioural Determinants of Nutrition Practices in Ultra Endurance Runners in Ireland. So the big thing here is it's a qualitative study, not quantitative, so meaning that it's not based on ones and zeros. So they didn't collect data about, how many carbs per hour they are taking, salt, fluid, all that sort of stuff. It's just based on interviews to see essentially their perceived nutritional knowledge and how that mapped against their strategies for racing ultras. So all of these guys, so there's 10 recreational ultra runners. They've all had racing experience before and have all experienced some sort of gut distress in the past. So there were 8 men, 2 women, average age of 46, although they didn't have to disclose age and one did withhold their age. So that just alters that a little bit, but I mean, negligible, right? And they're looking at 4 main areas in this research. So with respect to their history in ultra running. The first is their nutrition knowledge and where they got their information, how they approach their nutrition before, during, and after a race, their experience with managing gastrointestinal upset. So they used what they call a COM-B model, and essentially that it assumes that there's 3 things that determine behavior around eating, and that's the capability. So do you have the knowledge and skills to do something? Opportunity, does your environment, time and resources allow you to do it? And motivation, so what beliefs, fears and experiences are driving your decisions? So again, like a lot of these papers within the nutritional field, not even nutritional, like in the ultra running field, small study sizes. So I'm not for a moment saying that the experiences that these 10 individuals are sharing or that this paper is covering off are representative of runners at all. But what I do think it does a good job of is demonstrating just how varied everyone's background is, what influences them, why they do certain things, and their perception of what they're doing. I think oftentimes we think that we're operating in a certain way when it comes to preparing for these things, but when we actually look at the application, we probably don't stick to as much structure as we think we do. And I think this paper did a very, very good job of exploiting that. So again, we can't say that this is representative of all runners, but fuck, some of the responses in here are hilarious, as I've already alluded to. So what did the runners say? The major finding is the gap. So most of them said that they had a really good grounding in nutritional knowledge. So when they were asked to give a personal rating of their nutritional knowledge, they gave between a 5 and an 8 out of 10. Yet a lot of the practices, the application of their said knowledge was really, really reactionary, meaning that they ate based off hunger cues. So they only ate when they were hungry, they only drank when they were thirsty, and they only took on sodium when they saw salt patches developing on their skin or their clothes. So it doesn't really align with how much they said they were, which reminds me a lot of, when you're working with Gen Pop in dietary settings and you ask how someone's diet is. And like, oh, I eat pretty clean. I eat pretty clean. And then you get them to do like a 2 or 3 day food diary, and their perception of clean or regular eating or portion control is just not related to what they think. So oftentimes there's just a mismatch of perception and execution. So they also had a very limited, they had a basic conceptual understanding of a carb load, but again, when that came to putting into practice, it largely looked like, oh, I just ate a bit more pasta and pizza leading into the race, or I snacked a little bit more. So there was an understanding that they should be taking on more fuel, but the application, there wasn't a lot of like deliberate action and tracking of anything. It was just making assumptions, basically. It was more generalized than anything. And one of the biggest influences on their behavior around eating came with the fear of gastrointestinal upset. And this is where the quote comes in of the Imodium. So one person was quoted as saying, 2 Imodium before the start of the race, and I swear by that. I tell everyone I know. So their way of managing GI upset, rather than using a strategy within training to train your gut, knowing that the gut is trainable now. So going into a race with a set thing that you've practiced in training, there's like, I just take a couple of Imodium and I just tell everyone to do that. That's how I make sure that my race doesn't end from GI upset. That seems like shooting in the dark to me. And then we get on to my favorite participant. Some of the quotes from this person were insane. And maybe that's super judgmental of me, but I thought it was really, really funny. And I would love to speak to the authors about what was going through their head as nutrition experts when they're talking to this person. But he believed food could be poison and had previously fasted for 12 days while continuing to train, and primarily relied on meditative breathing and interacting with nature for energy. His actual quote was, breathing the air, touching the trees, because at the end of the day, trees give us energy. Okay, guy. I'm going to go ahead and disagree wholeheartedly with that as a nutritional strategy. But hey, apparently there is now a new field where we rely on photosynthesis as a new ultra-marathon nutritional strategy. So you've heard it here first. If you want to go ahead and be the person to fly that flag for photosynthesis, can you please let me know how that goes? And if you can get some good research behind you and prove that, my bank account will thank you dearly for now no longer needing to buy so many fucking gels. So what are the big gaps? Like what we're talking about here is a gap between knowledge and application. A lot of these people had a fundamental understanding of what it meant to apply some sort of nutritional strategy, but they didn't really know what to do afterwards. And that was a big area after the race that was left untouched. And to be honest, I think for most people, they don't really know what to do after when it comes to recovery. And we spoke last week about the massive caloric debt that exists in an ultramarathon, and even off the back of long runs, if you're not making those incremental adjustments to your diet during the week as training volume does increase across the course of a prep. So these people were in the exact same boat. Oftentimes it was just like a big pressure release, which again is quite indicative of like a recreational runner. They're going to put a concentrated effort into preparing for a said race, and then their training probably looks very, very different. And for some people, almost completely non-existent after a race for a little while. So they then go into this, oh, well, I'm not doing anything, therefore I can't eat. Otherwise, I'm just going to put on weight. And this then gets into that interesting conversation about why or where we all got into racing or ultras in the first place. And we all come from such varying backgrounds. This is the area where nutrition is so difficult because it is behavioral. Unfortunately, when it comes to, like food addiction or any body image issues like that, it is behavioral, right? And unfortunately, that stimulus, which is food, you cannot ignore. You can't live without food. It's not like, oh, I just need to kick, drugs and alcohol. I can abstain from that and exist as a human. You can't just decide not to eat or drink anymore. You will die. I don't have to fucking tell you this, right? It sounds so stupid when you're talking about it. But these are the things that influence what we do. And based on how you were brought up, the things that you were exposed to, during your formative years. Like for me personally, I come from a rugby league background, a team sports background, where being big, strong, powerful is the aim of the game. And I grew up in a culture where you're watching all these cartoons like fucking Dragon Ball Z and Ninja Turtles and dudes are just jacked and shredded. So I have a bias towards aesthetics, and that still continues as part of my training. I still like to look a certain way. I have no desire to look like an Olympic marathon runner. I want chest, back, and arms. That doesn't mean I need to be fucking stage ready for the Olympia, but I do care about carrying a certain amount of tissue, which I know is detrimental to performance. So there is a bias inside my head that is limiting to my performance. So the same goes for nutrition. And that background for me is going to influence how and why I eat. So I have a big bias towards how much protein I eat, which is going to be very different to what a lot of runners eat, to what females eat comparative to me, and what someone going through pre, peri, or post menopause is going through. This is so fucking convoluted. And the fact that we can't really place any controls. This is why nutrition research is so hard, because to control anything is to control the behavior of an individual. And that's really difficult to do. You can only control so many variables without essentially making it Big Brother, right? So again, I want to use it as an opportunity to give grace to yourself. But I think that you still want to try and follow the research to a starting point for you. And the example I would use now is, it seems pretty undeniable that some form of carbohydrate intake that is measurable and repeatable throughout training that you can then map onto a race seems beneficial for improved performance and recovery. I don't really care what number you decide to land on as a starting point, as long as it's not 0. It seems to me like 60 is a good starting place for most people. If you can get 60 grams of carbs in per hour, and that was taking you from no grams per hour, or maybe you went on a 2 or 3 hour long run and you would take one 20-gram gel, and then that leads us down to, what does the source need to be? I totally agree. These gels are fucking expensive. And if you're in the ultra game, you are going to be dedicating a lot of your weekly grocery bill and your funds to gels. And they are so expensive. So if we're splitting hairs around what the carbohydrate source is, I understand, yes, the science is showing that there's different transporters and stuff, and that we can absorb the carbohydrates and whatnot at a faster rate based off these different ratios of carb sources. But if the difference between you getting carbs in versus no carbs in means you're eating some lollies or having some maple syrup or literally just putting some fucking caster sugar in water, I still think that is a net positive above 0. So don't ever think that your barrier to entry for endurance running is gels. They are super convenient. For some people, it causes a lot of GI distress. For some people, it doesn't at all. For some, they're happy to train their gut in that way, and it becomes a really good race strategy to go fast and go far. Maybe it is a case of intensity and ability. Those of us that are never going to be an elite or at the top of the field, maybe we can get by eating more solid foods than the elites, because our overall motion, the way that the blood is being expressed either to or from the gut itself just isn't under the same stress that the elites are, so we can afford to eat more. But if that keeps you in the sport, I think that's really, really cool as well. So again, little side tangents that I've gone on there, but I think this paper does a really, really good job of laying the land of how diverse thoughts are within what is like a really average population. I think the fact that they didn't go and attack elite fields is really, really telling and is more useful for us to then start to have more conversations. And that's what they led to in their discussion is, why aren't these people going out and seeking professional nutritional advice? And again, it comes back to like these behavioral differences, again, cost. Like if all of a sudden you want to enter these ultra races, one, they come with a price tag in of themselves. Then you need shoes, then you need packs, then you need bladders or soft flasks, then you need to be preparing food, and whether that is gels or it's solids, it still costs money. And then you've got, maybe a coach. So you're trying to get your training practices right. And then it's like, well, how much of the strength side of things am I looking at? Do I want a separate strength coach? Does that coach have a fundamental knowledge of strength and how to apply that to what I'm trying to do? And then, am I paying a nutritionist, a dietitian? Is it just a one-off plan? Is it continued support? Is it just a generalized plan, or is it bespoke? Like, there's so many things, and all of a sudden you can be spending hundreds of dollars a week on something that was meant to be fun. And I think that's where us as practitioners, or myself as a practitioner, it can get difficult, right? Because I'm passionate about these things. I love the nitty gritty. I love the nuance. And it's just through genuine curiosity. I love to expand the knowledge on things and follow where certain things are going. But that doesn't mean that's what's keeping the average person in the sport, or why they even rocked up in the first place. So sometimes I think we also need to zoom out as practitioners in our own field and just accept that people aren't going to care about the same things that we care about to the same degree. And that doesn't mean that we don't possess value. And it makes it really difficult to share that when it's not received in the same way that we hope it would be received. But as long as we're continuing to put out the information, just like I'm doing now in this me just staring at a camera, I hope that there's someone listening to this that's like, okay, cool. I don't have to, structure this in a way that it has to be super, super serious. And it may just be a simple engagement with a coach for a little bit of time. Or maybe I have a preconceived notion about what that service is. And then once I get into it, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be at all. And it is really enjoyable. And it is actually helping to expand my passion for running in the first place. So ultimately, I hope that that's what this paper does, and hearing me talk about it does. I'll share the links to it. But yeah, the person talking about getting energy from the trees and the sun, a 12-day fast, like I think we can agree that we're past that as a nutritional strategy. Like fasting, even like these longer fast during runs, I'm just not sure. There's just not enough in it for me to believe that that is a positive long-term strategy. And again, all of these things continue to evolve. Just because something works now, like I still think from my first 100 mile, that I was able to take on solids with relative ease based on my ability to run it, which included a lot of walking. Whereas when I entered the Cape, I was trying to run a lot more. The intensity was way higher than what I'd ever delivered before with the intent of running that far. And I got caught out. It didn't work for me. So, I've had to take some time and reflect about what it means to, race a 100 mile. What am I looking to get out of it? How do I change my strategy? Was it just bad luck? How much do I live with that result in the fear of what I do now at Scenic Rim? Because they're completely different. And again, I always go back to, that's the beauty of ultra, right? Is the differences in these courses, not how much they're the same, and that they each possess their own story, your ability to evolve and adjust what you do. So there is that element of yes, let's find out what the best practices are, but realize that we are all individuals. So you don't also have to hear any information and get your hackles up and be like, there's no way that can be true. This didn't work for me. It's like nutrition and anything, any training practice is not meant to meet the demands of every single individual in that sport. It's never going to happen. It probably won't even meet the majority, which again, only has to be 50.5% right, which means a lot of people it's not going to work for. So that's where the individual responsibility comes into everything that you do. And that trial and error is important, and that we need the anecdotes to drive the science. It's like, okay, well, if we start seeing patterns, let's pour some research dollars into it and get a research team to see if there's any validity around what we're doing. And eventually we can start to develop more and more. And I think we'll see that now that we are becoming so aware that there's an underrepresentation of women in the research data. So that will be an evolving field in the next 10 to 20 years that I'm really excited for as well, because I want to continue to serve the females in the sport as well, because I am the father of a daughter, you know, and I want to make sure that she's equipped with things in her life that are going to bring out the best performances, experiences, longevity, and whatever it is that she decides to do. So it's a really cool emerging part in the sport. That being said, we'll get on to the next portion, which was an amazing result. The Gold Coast Marathon yesterday. The Australian record broken, as I was saying earlier. Haftu Strintzos, an Ethiopian immigrant. So a bit about this guy's background. So he runs a 2:06:20, breaks the Australian record, record's a record. First guy to win the event in 20 years. I did a bit of a dive on his background. Again, his Strintzos, I was like, that sounds Greek, which I was correct. But then I'm looking at him, you know, and I'm like, he looks African, Ethiopian, cool. How does this all work? And how is he an Australian, blah, 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 blah. So turns out he was adopted by a Greek Australian mother. So he came out here in 2011. He lost his parents in a lot of the civil conflict that was happening over there, left behind two brothers, his grandma, who subsequently passed away not too long after he immigrated here, I believe, and, you know, went to grammar school here, started running, and was luckily, coincidentally, coached by Craig Mottram, one of our great exports of endurance running here in Australia. Gets connected, ends up running for Villanova University at the NCAA level in cross country, becomes a master in electrical engineering. So not only is he fit, fast, he's fucking smart. Like, I think this just, not to get political on this podcast, is never something that I really want to ever touch on, but in this age where there is just so much animosity around immigration and stuff like that, I think it's also really cool to champion when it goes right. And someone who embodies the values of what it means to be an Australian, wants to represent Australia as someone who's born in Ethiopia and has then gone and studied abroad as well. Like, that tells you something about like the personal pride and appreciation of the quality of life that someone gets when they get to immigrate to a country like Australia. So what a champion effort. So to steer away from the politicized stuff there that I just touched on, just his results. I know a lot of people that are listening to this, you know, they run ultras, but I think it's also so cool to look at the razor's edge that marathons are run on. And maybe you're not a runner at all listening to this. You're just purely interested in the sport itself and don't have a really strong grasp of what it means or what a strategy for a marathon, a road marathon looks like. And the biggest difference, I was talking to a friend who was asking me some questions as we were tracking some different mates along the race yesterday who were running, you know, closer to that sort of 3:30 to 4 hour time. And he was like, is that a good time? And I was like, with respect, and even as someone who would run a similar time to that, it's about average for someone who's like dedicated to a marathon training block. You know, it's probably relatively young, you know, in their 30s or something like that. If you put in good work, you've got good base, you can definitely work towards that. But like anything below that, like looking at this is just insane. These guys are running on a razor's edge, like just below VO2 max. Like they're just below redlining, but their ability to withstand that from a physiological standpoint is so fucking high. Whereas regular folk like us, you know, we're probably barely running a tempo effort, just trying to hang on to that consistency of pace. So they're just a level above of what they've adapted for. So his splits for this marathon, again, this speaks to the consistency of the man. First 5K, 15:03, then 15, 15:10, 15, 14:52, 15:02, 14:33, which is, I believe, when he made the move, which was about 7 or 8K to go, 15:10, and then the last couple of kilometers beyond 40-kilometer mark was 6:24, which is a 2:54 minute kilometer. Like, just insane. And again, like, the average person hears the difference in the record, you know, like they're edging on that 2 hours now, that difference in 6 minutes, like, oh man, like that's pretty close. It's like even the difference between the 2 and the 2:06, like that is just levels above again. Like the margins at the top, they don't seem like much because, you know, you see 6 minutes and you're like, oh, that's just like a, you know, the difference between a half a K or a K if I'm out recce running with some mates. But those margins for that time is just so incredible. Again, the sport is well and truly alive. It's constantly evolving. But again, just getting back to story itself. Like, who doesn't want to hear that story? Like, I was hooked more than the result. When I saw the surname, what he looked like, I was like, I want to know something about that because he does not look Greek. And then you do the digging around, you see the story, you see the background, the adversity that he's overcome, like having to come over here, get an education while his two brothers are still over there, bordering on starvation, like during the COVID lockdown and stuff like that, and he couldn't get back to them. And then he'd move back home to Australia during COVID, even though he was still studying at Villanova, and he was getting up at like 3:30 in the morning to get his classes done via Zoom, didn't miss any classes, didn't miss any training, and was pretty much just working on opposite ends of the day because everything was set to US time and still got it all done. Like, you just see the work ethic that is ingrained from experiences of you as a child and how you can really use that to shape your future. I think is so fucking inspiring. And you know, that is motivating to me, regardless of what distance he's running. Like, I could just hear that story, you know, of even just becoming an electrical engineer and be like, that's fucking insane. That's awesome. Like, I love the fact that Australia, the country, has helped facilitate this man's life and his experience now, and has given him these opportunities to now go study and get an education abroad, experience what it's like to be a US collegiate athlete, and then go run an Aussie record, be one of the best to do it here. Like, that is so inspiring. And I hope that you draw the inspiration that I'm getting out of it too. So I guess when it comes to like the preparation that he's required, this is where I want to now touch on what I've got coming up for the Scenic Rim 100. As I said, I've got some new kit. I've always been a big fan of the Salomon running packs, but now that, you know, my races are starting to get a lot longer, or at least longer focus now, moving further away from the 50 to 100 to 100 mile plus, the Advi Skin 5s are just too small, right? With the amount of mandatory gear that I'm always banging on about that you need, I just needed a bigger pack. So this will definitely be enough to get me through Scenic Rim. So this is the Advi Skin 12. Just the upgrades, again, I have no idea how new this model is. For some of you, you might be like, this is old news, dude, wake the fuck up. But again, I like to think that anytime you're able to share something, there's probably going to be someone down the line that is going to gain something from it. So the biggest thing that I love about these packs, and again, I ended up wearing a Mac pack during the Cape. I just borrowed it off a friend. Again, looking at cost and opportunity, it was just a couple of $100 that I didn't want to have to spend at the time. Now that opportunity's come around, blah, 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 blah. We're going again quicker than I would have anticipated it at the 100-mile distance. I was like, well, I might as well just invest. So I went and got the Salomon pack because I've always used it. But the seams, it seems so silly, but the seams are just a little bit different. They're a little bit thicker, neater, smoother. It just sits so well on your back. They're so comfortable. That mesh on the inside, it's got all your bladder hooks, so it actually clips now, where it just used to be a little hook. I don't use a bladder. I just stuff soft flasks in there. So I did that for the first time on the weekend. Still felt really comfortable. The clips, so the way that the elastic bands sort of just clip on to the front here. So they've just got their little hooks that just pops straight on in. So you've got two of those, and then you've got your little drawstring that helps tighten all that up. It's a flawless mechanism. It just always feels so comfy when you put that on, and you can get it snug without it feeling overly restrictive, which is obviously not a feeling that you want to feel when you're going to be running for, what's more than likely 24 hours plus. And that straight away was something that I noticed was different around like my upper back and my neck, because for these races, oftentimes you'll have to get a GPS attached. And that was something I didn't really touch on the Cape. We just zip tied the GPS unit to the top strap. By the time I pulled out, which wasn't even halfway, my neck was so sore from where my pack was just bouncing around and driving the plastic from the Ziploc onto my neck. It was really uncomfortable. But already just the way that this thing fits on is so much nicer. Obviously you've got the zip opener, which the AdV5 doesn't happen. That's where you get the added space. But you've got two zip pockets, whereas the AdV5 only has one. I also wear a race belt because I don't like wearing the flasks on the front. So then straight away, those zip pockets become easy to store sort of nutrition, my phone, headphones, extra headlamps that just keep it easy of access. I even had, like I was practicing with a little bit of solid food. So I had some cookies and some lollies in the front. That all just jammed in there seamlessly. Wasn't like digging into me or anything like that. So I cannot speak highly enough of one, how light, how comfortable, the storage, the convenience, how easy it is to get off. It takes, not even a minute just to rip it off, get rid of some empty soft flasks, get your fresh ones out of the back, put it in, zip it up, bang, you're on your way again. And then they're also compatible with the pole quiver. I've not used a pole quiver. It's one thing that I don't like about it, and it's more the old school. I don't think there's many people that aren't using pole quivers these days, but this used to be the old mechanism for the poles. So they would just sort of slide through there, and then you pull down on these straps, trying to finesse that while you're running. And then sometimes it would like come loose and one end would fall out, and then they're all sort of just sprayed behind you. And it's just one added thing to frustrate you during a time where you really need to keep your shit together. So the fact that I'm able to now ditch that mechanism and they are all compatible. So they just have those little loops there, which again, sort of just hook onto, I'll flip in the right way. They've just got the little straps up there. So they just hook straight in, and then you secure that to the bottom, pull it tight, and you're good to go. Sorry if you're only listening to this, it's probably not going to be the most entertaining. So I encourage you to jump on it and watch some of the video that's available for this podcast to go through some of those things. But yeah, that's a piece of equipment that is going to help me, just the access to the quiver, the comfortability, all of those things. It doesn't sound like much, but when you're talking about neck strain, it's just something you don't want to have to consider during a 100-mile race. Like if that's just one little thing that's not dropping at you like Chinese water torture, then it's just going to make your ability to focus on the more positive side of things, because that's ultimately what ultras is about, right? It is constantly trying to find the light in the dark. And even when you're in the dark, just accepting that it can only last for so long, which is easier said than done. And I learned that the hard way. I'm still continuing to process that. And I think that's the cool part about races is as time goes on, you continue to take different points of view. You'll listen to someone else talk about their race experience that you may have some crossover with, that gives you different perspective on how you think about yourself and the way that things went down and how to approach things next. And the reality is there's no perfect way. It's so tricky, but that's the exciting part, is the fact that no one is safe. No one has got this all figured out, and all we can do is continue to share our experiences, gain the experience ourselves, and hope that we can prepare as well as we can. But at the end of the day, you're at the whims of nature, and that's what ultra is all about, is just relinquishing that control at the end of the day. And when you can do that, I think that's where the real fun and growth comes. Maybe not necessarily in the moment, but in retrospect. So look, I hope you enjoyed some of the topics that we covered off today. We danced around the place a little bit, and I hope it at least sparks some thought about, from a nutritional aspect, how you can map that onto areas such as strength, and even the way that you do train for ultras. And it's like, how intentional are you with what you are doing, and where is your knowledge at? What are the gaps in your knowledge, and to what level can you look to close those gaps? And when you do, are you actually effectively applying what you're trying to change? So if anything, I just hope it leads to a little bit more introspection about how you're going about things. On that, have a wonderful week, and I'll catch you at the next one.